Hello and welcome to FPL Mate, your best mate for fantasy Premier League content for the 2020-21 season. My name is Dan and today we're doing another episode of Buy, Sell, Keep, Avoid. A series, I guess, which is quickly becoming your guys' favourite series and also quickly becoming my favourite videos to make on this channel. So if you are still really enjoying these videos, do remember to give a big thumbs up. Hopefully I can continue to help you make some, progressive and really effective transfers and sort of teach you how to not waste transfers and, use them progressively and effectively. But if you've not watched these fabulous videos before, I say fabulous, but that's for you to judge. If you've not watched these videos before, this is how it works. So I'm splitting our players that I'm going to be talking about in this video into 4 categories. Buy, players that you probably don't have but you should consider bringing in. Sell, players that you probably have but you should consider removing. Keep, players that you probably have and should keep. And avoid, players that you probably don't have and funnily enough you should probably avoid having them too. So just if you want this kind of thing, if you like this kind of thing, this is always to help you try and use your transfers to the best possible. Avoid sort of these bad bandwagons. I'll talk about players that a lot of people are bringing in but I don't think you really should be bringing in. I'll talk about players that perhaps a lot of people are looking to sell, but perhaps I think maybe you shouldn't sell them. Maybe just wait off a little bit. So that's the kind of thing we talk about today. So as an example, we'll talk about the players I spoke about last week, and it was a mixed bag of the predictions. So last week, obviously, I said to bring in KDB and Podence. Podence was kind of unlucky because he got injured after I made the video. So I kind of consider myself a little bit unlucky on that buy. KDB, I mean, everyone thought he'd do well. In terms of keeps, Bruno turned out to be a great keep, a really great keep. So well done everyone who did keep Bruno after watching this video because, yeah, that worked out well. And I also said keep Werner, which that one was a little bit disappointing as well. I think he was another player that we all expected to do really well, but it wasn't to happen. Sells and avoids all pretty much either blanked, didn't play, did rubbish. So I think those work. So if you sold and avoided the players I spoke about last week, I think you probably did pretty well. In fact, overall, if you sort of followed the stuff in this in last week's video, you probably did pretty well. So let's see how we can do this week. And we'll start with buys. So we're going to do 2 of each player. So we're going to start off with some buys. So my first buy is Raul Jiménez. I guess in a difficult week for predicting the most likely players to score points and therefore the most worth transferring in, Jiménez for me checks most of the boxes that I'm looking for in players that I want to bring in this particular game week. So fixtures, check. He plays against some defences that have looked really, really poor so far in Fulham, Leeds and Newcastle, all in a row, all of those 3 fixtures in a row. So that's really nice. There will definitely be some really good opportunities for a player like Jiménez to score some goals in those fixtures just because he's going to be the main striker, the number 9, if you like. The sole number 9 is what I mean by that. So that's going to be some good opportunities for him. Form, I guess you give him a check as well. At least from a statistical standpoint, he's showing really good form, Jiménez. So far, he's averaged sort of 3 shots in the box per game, 1 big chance per game. He's also got the 5th best non-penalty expected goal stat so far. And it's the 7th best out of all players. So yeah, it's 1.62. 5th best out of the forwards and 7th best out of all players in the whole game. So that's pretty good. Pretty good for a non-penalty expected goal stat right there. His expected assist is about 0.28, which I guess could be a lot worse, but it could be a lot better as well. But it's not bad for a forward. These stats, of course, were recorded in some pretty tough games, I would say. And most of the players with the better stats have already played at least one of the far weaker teams. So you sort of your West Broms and your Fulhams. The players above Jiménez in these stats have played these teams, so perhaps obscuring it a little bit. But perhaps what's the most important box to check right now in a season dominated by penalties, and this season really is dominated by penalties so far, is that Jiménez is the penalty taker at Wolves. Leeds, who Jiménez plays in Gameweek 5, they top the charts for penalties conceded so far with 3. And it probably won't surprise you to learn either that Fulham and Newcastle have each conceded 1 penalty too. So overall, this is looking like a really positive transfer to make, especially if you're looking to move Werner on. And for me, he kind of beats some of the other options in a similar price bracket that I'm sure you're sort of hoping that I'll speak about today. So I'll touch on them very briefly now. So Jamie Vardy, he's pretty much seems reliant on penalties to get any attacking threat, really. So 90% of all of his attacking threat is coming purely through penalties. So if the penalties continue for Leicester, fantastic for Vardy. But if they do dry up a little bit, or he gets slightly less penalties and it sort of regresses to the average, Jamie Vardy's not going to look quite as good. So in open play, he's actually not looking great statistically or, in the eye test, really. Danny Ings, who looks a good option, But he plays in a striking pair rather than alone. Southampton have looked a little bit questionable at times. I know you could probably say the same about Wolves, but yeah, I'm not fully convinced there. But Danny Ings still a really good option, obviously. Dominic Calvert-Lewin, he really does look fantastic, but he just doesn't have that added bonus of being a penalty taker. So naturally, I'm less confident given the state of this season so far. So Jamie Vardy, Danny Ings, Dominic Calvert-Lewin, all fantastic options, but by a hair, I do prefer Raul Jiménez, so that's the player I am going to be personally endorsing. But, they're all going to be great options. They're all going to get you points. So don't stress about it too much. So now we'll go to my next buy, it's Wilfried Zaha. A lot of people have asked me about Son replacement, as he's going to be injured for at least a few weeks. Therefore, a sensible transfer that you can make this week would be to bring in a mid-price midfielder, I guess. Or maybe you've got a little bit of money in the bank and you sort of want to upgrade... you want to upgrade something else. Maybe you want to upgrade a 5.5 million or a 6 million midfielder up to a player around Son's price, around Zaha's price. So yeah, there really are a lot of good options around this mid-level, mid-price midfielder mark. I would name Mahrez, James Rodriguez, Harvey Barnes and Zaha as the best options, but as you might have guessed, my favourite is Zaha. And one of the reasons I like Zaha is because, you may have guessed it, he's on penalties. And a season that's full of penalties, we want to be bringing these penalties takers in. Zaha fits that criteria, and other mid-price midfielders sort of aren't quite fitting that criteria in terms of being, definite penalty takers. Zaha also has the big advantage that he's playing out of his FPL position, so even though he's listed as a midfielder, he's actually playing as a striker in a front two for Palace. He's also the main man at the club in a team that's looking pretty good, in pretty good form, and he's looking himself in a really positive and good form as well. So he's already scored a load of FPL points already. I think he's the 4th highest scoring midfielder so far. He's averaging a goal per game. That's sort of backed up by underlying stats as well. His expected goal involvement so far is 2.2. Really, really nice there. But perhaps most interesting thing about Zaha and Crystal Palace, to be fair, is they're about to have a really nice run of fixtures. They're going to have a huge fixture swing. So the only red fixture they have between now and game week 14 is next game week, and that's against Chelsea. Chelsea, of course, have looked defensively pretty weak, so they could easily be goals for Zaha in there, even in their so-called hardest fixture in the next sort of 10 game weeks. So overall, Zaha is in good form. He's in a good form team. He's taken penalties and he's about to embark on some really fantastic fixtures. The stage is sort of set to bring Wilfried Zaha into your team. So that's why he's sort of topping my list in the terms of Son replacements / mid-price midfielders. Time for some sells now, and Timo Werner is the first one on my list. Probably the biggest disappointment so far this season in both FPL terms and perhaps actual football terms as well, if you're a Chelsea fan. You might not have been too impressed by Timo Werner so far. I'm not saying he won't come good eventually, but right now it's not looking so good. I did sort of advise on keeping him against West Brom, and I stand by that just because West Brom are conceding so many goals, as we know. The problem is that Werner is playing, out on the left. Chelsea are not at their full creative strength, and they won't be for another couple of weeks when more of their players come back to fitness. And it's just not the right time to own Werner, I don't think, especially when there's a clear better options. A player and the player and the team sort of a bit off form. Sometimes you'll be punished if you don't make the move, and if you wait on it too long and you wait for Werner to come good eventually. Sometimes it's better off to say, okay, he's not doing so well right now, he might be better later, maybe we think about bringing him in a little bit later. Now's not really the time to own Werner, and I think that's the situation we're in right now, especially as I mentioned earlier. There are some really nice other options that you can replace Werner with, so make the move, I guess. Werner is currently 13th for non-penalty expected goals amongst forwards, despite having some favourable fixtures already played against Brighton and West Brom. He drops to 15th most expected goals amongst forwards if you include penalties. So that's actually sort of really quite low down the list. He's only had 3 shots on target so far and 1 big chance, which he did not finish, unfortunately. And typically, you sort of want a lot more for all that money. Remember, he's a really expensive striker. He's a premium striker, 9.4 million right now. The money could just be really well spent elsewhere. With Chelsea's fixtures looking like they're only going to get worse, I think now's perhaps the time to move Werner on. And like I said, Vardy, Ings, Calvert-Lewin are all great replacements. I probably would prefer to go to Jimenez, but only by a hair. They're all really good options. So my next sell is Matt Doherty, Doherty. I can't remember how you say his name now. I'm sure someone in the comments will correct me. Doherty. Let's go with Doherty because I think that's right. So I think Doherty is probably the defender to move on this game week. And I'm sure a few of you probably do own him as well, which is why he's in the sell category. Anyone who brought Doherty in did so with a good idea of who he is, or at least what he was at Wolves. So that was an attacking right wing back playing in often an inverted position in the opposition's box, creating chances, taking shots in a, let's admit, Wolves were a very defensively solid team last season. And I'm sort of afraid he's not really any of those things anymore. So in the Spurs formation, they play 4 at the back, and it's the wingers and midfielders that have more creative influence and responsibility than in Wolves perhaps, where the wing backs supply a lot of the creativity. Now Doherty still has a little bit of license to get forward, but not as much as he did in Wolves. This is sort of evidenced by the fact that he's only had 1 shot so far this season, with 29 defenders ahead of him having already taken at least 2 shots. His 2 key passes so far, that's sort of a little bit of a better stat, but he's still nowhere near the top amongst defenders. And remember, we're paying a lot for Doherty, so we want him to be among the top statistically in amongst the defenders. You can sort of add to this the fact that Reguilon, the Spanish left-back, is going to be added to the Spurs team. Reguilon's also an attacking fullback, which means that the 2 fullbacks will sort of have to take it in turns getting forward. This will give Doherty even less license to get forward. He's going to have even more defensive responsibility, I guess. And in addition to this, Spurs are just not as good defensively as Wolves, and I don't think they really have the personnel at the back right now. Often they don't concede many goals, but they seem to be completely unable to keep a clean sheet, which of course is no good for FPL. So in essence, we're vastly overpaying for a real premium price for an FPL asset that really no longer exists. We're paying for last season's Doherty, and we're getting a very different player, a player in a very different system, a player in a very different team, a player who's playing differently to the way that made him so valuable last season. So unfortunately, I just don't think he's going to be able to replicate his great FPL scores from the past 2 seasons. And there's just some better options for a cheaper price. Even though, Doherty, he's a great player, and I do want to make sure that I do say that he is a great player, but he's just not the right FPL asset that we're perhaps looking for. So you can sort of downgrade to Lamptey or Reece James. You go someone sort of in the middle price like Castan. He's looking pretty good as well. Or if you want to splash the cash a little bit, you could upgrade him to a Robertson or Alexander-Arnold. Either way, Doherty looks like a sell to me. So let's go to keeps, and we'll start off with Alexander Mitrović. For whatever reason, I don't fully understand this, but Mitrović is the 4th most sold player this game week so far. And I guess if you're taking him out for one of the fantastic forward options that I've already spoken about, then okay, it's an alright transfer. But honestly, those strikers are kind of in a different price bracket anyway to Mitrović, which means people are probably more likely transferring in players like Bamford, Morpay, Callum Wilson. Now, on the face of it, these might look like positive transfers to you, but can you really tell me that any of those players I just listed are a significant upgrade on Mitrović? Surely you can use your transfer in a more effective way, in a more progressive way. I personally think it could actually even be a step backwards, and here's why. So Mitrović is the Fulham penalty taker in a season of the penalties, as I keep saying, we should be bringing in penalty takers, not removing them from our team. Mitrović, despite having started only 2 games this season, is second behind Salah for total shots taken. That's an insane stat. He's also 4th for shots on target. He's 4th for shots in the box, and this is sort of this is out of all players in the Premier League. This is about include. You sort of Salah, you include Mane, you include Vardy, you include all the big players that you think are taking loads of shots. Mitrović is right up there, top of the list, despite only starting 2 games. That's actually crazy. I mean, he's scored twice already. He's had 2 big chances. His non-penalty expected goals so far is kind of up there at 1.19, and you can add penalties to that as well. So that's without penalties. So with his penalties, even more valuable. So you can sort of see that although Fulham are, they're not in great form, they're kind of doing kind of badly as a team, that doesn't mean Mitrović is a bad FPL option. He's still getting plenty of chances to score. He's already scored 2 in 2 starts. Pretty much half of Fulham attacks are aimed at Mitrović to score. So there really is such thing as having a good FPL asset in a struggling team. Fulham have Wolves next, who have just come off the back of, I guess, 2 pretty poor defensive performances in a row. So let's see what Mitrović can do. Mitrović is in my team. I've not even considered moving him on. I've not even considered transferring him out because I just don't think that's the right transfer, because statistically and in terms of FPL points, he's doing pretty good. So yeah, not sure why people are removing him, but There you go. Just wanted to warn you against that one. Make sure you don't get on these bad bandwagons, because that's not really one I want to be on. So I'm going to include for my next keep Raul Jiménez again, just because even though I put him as a buy, he's also a keep because there seems to be another bad bandwagon of selling him this week. And I want to try and help you guys stay away from these bad bandwagons, as I always say. I can only guess that people are selling Jiménez is because he scored 0 points in game week 3. And I know not everyone watches the game, but Jiménez was unlucky to score an own goal and that give him minus points and therefore 0 points total. But that probably won't happen even once more in this entire season. So taking him out of your team, it looks really, really knee-jerky. So I won't go into why Jiménez is amazing because I think I've already covered that. But I will speculate that FPL managers are probably knee-jerking Jiménez to, I guess, Calvert-Lewin, Ings, Jamie Vardy, just because they all scored points in Game Week 3 and Jiménez did not score points in Game Week 3. I don't think you should be part of that gang. It's a really sideways move and arguably a negative transfer. You should transfer in a way that will really improve your team. And I'm struggling to think of a player that would be really worth transferring in for Jiménez in order to achieve that. So in conclusion, Jiménez is not only someone that you should keep if you already have him, but absolutely look at buying if you don't have him. So really good option for the next couple of game weeks. So finally, let's look at some avoids. Always the controversial ones, aren't they? And my first one is Jimmy Dunne. A lot of people are bringing him in, and I kind of understand why, because he's a super cheap way into the Burnley defence. But the Burnley defence doesn't seem as appealing as it was last year so far. Anyway, and not only did I see this as a sort of a weak transfer, and it probably won't add any cutting edge to your team, but it's also a transfer out waiting to happen. So Burnley's defence will be really good when Ben Mee and James Tarkowski are back fit and playing. But when either of those are back, that means Jimmy Dunne is no longer going to be playing. Jimmy Dunne will have to, unfortunately, drop out the team. So what you have now is a weaker defence in the short term and a transfer out waiting to happen sort of in the mid-term, and therefore a wasted slot in your defence. If you're on a wild card, then fair enough. I guess you could bring him in as your 5th and cheapest defender slot, but sort of using one of your precious 37 free transfers on a 5th defender slot that you might start once or twice in the short term and then you'll probably never use him again. It kind of seems like a bit of a waste of a transfer, and surely you can use your transfer in a more effective way. And for that reason, Jimmy Dunne, very good prospect. I'm sure he's got a fantastic future ahead of him, but he has to go down as an FPL avoid for me. Secondly, a little bit more of a controversial one, Mason Mount. This is a really tough week, by the way, for choosing avoids, just because, like I said, this last game week was so all over the place, so unpredictable. It's tough to say anything definitive. But I'm going to go for Mason Mount, and at 6.9 million, a lot of people are bringing Mason Mount into their midfield after he scored the 12 points, against West Brom. This to me is kind of the definition of knee-jerk, bringing in a player because he scored nicely in one individual game week against literally the worst defence in the league. And I'm not saying Mount has played badly. I've actually been quite impressed with him, to be honest. But as an FPL asset, I'm just not fully convinced. 0.56 expected goals and 0.78 expected assists. He's not bad. It's actually pretty good, but it's not amazing in 3 full 90 minutes played. Overall stats, his stats, they're far from bad. But they're not really anywhere near the higher reaches of the table in terms of players and sort of midfielders that cost a similar price. And I think there's much more you can get for a similar amount of money. You can go for Zaha, that I mentioned earlier, sort of Barnes, you can go for James Rodriguez. Even if you wanted to go a little bit cheaper, Phil Foden and Trossard probably offer a little bit more value as well. You think also that when Pulisic and Ziyech are fit, Mount would probably be one of the players who might start to rotate a little bit, become a rotation risk in that Chelsea midfield. So it's not that he's a bad pick. It's more like there is much better options you can choose. So therefore, why not just go for one of the better options? I guess. Like I said, it's a tough week to choose these, but I think Mount is definitely capable of picking up some points, but I just can't see why. I can't see why he's even in the top 5 picks within his price range right now. I think there is quite a few better options, and for that reason, he's got to go down as an avoid because you're using your transfer badly when you have better options right there for yourself. So there you go. Those are all of the players. I hope you really did enjoy this video today. As I said, if you do, please do give us a big thumbs up, and I'll just continue doing this every single game week as long as you guys want it. Team selection video tomorrow, so do make sure you subscribe if you haven't done already. Turn those notifications on as well, and I'll show you my scores from last week. Sort of look at what transfers, what captaincy I might go for, how I'm going to set up my team for game week 4. And then, yeah, obviously we'll do a couple of videos after that in the week as well. So, yeah, do check that out. If you want to look in my description, if you want to follow me on Twitter, almost at 5,000 followers on Twitter. So it would be really useful if you could help me achieve that, I guess. Instagram, you can follow me on there. Mini League, you can join. If you want to support me on Patreon and chat to me in my server, in my Discord server, then please do check that out. All of the links in the description right now. Go check them out. And aside from that, thank you so much for watching. Please join me on my team selection and transfers video tomorrow. And until then, I'll see you later, mates. Bye-bye.